Okay, when it comes to factoring, when your parents remember the blessings and the awesomeness of factoring, or maybe they're nightmares, either way, this style is likely what they remember most. So let's begin the joy of the journey. Factoring rule number one: if there is anything, whether it be a number or a variable or both, that all the terms have in common, factor that out first. So that's something that I probably will forget sometimes to remind you to check, because it's often not something we have to pull out. But if we don't remember to, when it does need to be pulled out, it'll cause problems. Now, we are learning to factor, if you look right here at the title, quadratic trinomials. So let's start by understanding what we're factoring. So what does quadratic mean? Well, quadratic means the highest exponent that's present in the expression is 2. The highest exponent is 2. What does trinomial mean? So tri, like tricycle, means 3. So trinomial means it has 3 terms. So we'll be learning how to factor trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. So obviously x in both these spots is a variable. B and c are numbers. So it could be like x squared minus 4x plus 5. So b is negative 4, c is 5. So the b and the c represent numbers that we'll have when we're given the problem. So look at this first example down here. 6 is the b, 8 is the c. So all answers for these factoring questions will be in the form x plus m, x plus p, where p and m are numbers. They could be positive or negative, but they will be whole numbers, or integers, I should say. So the answer for this could look something like x minus 5, x plus 1. That's not the answer to this one. I'm just saying that's the style of the answer will look like. So I've mentioned in earlier lessons that factoring is a lot like the reverse distributive property or the reverse FOIL. Like when we did factoring by grouping, that was kind of a reverse FOIL. This one is very similar in that respect. It's a reverse FOIL. So let's begin. Our very first one. Factor x squared plus 6x plus 8. So in general, when you have these quadratic, you see the squared, trinomials, you'll want to think what multiplies to be the last number and adds or subtracts to be the middle number. What multiplies to be the last number, what adds or subtracts to be the middle number. So what I recommend you do, and this is how I was taught way back in the 90s, I know, I'm old, is list the factors of 8. In other words, what two numbers, if you multiply them by together, would equal 8. So I just know 2 pair, 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. When I look at this, you're allowed to add or subtract these numbers in either order. In other words, I could say 1 plus 8 is 9. I could say 1 minus 8 is negative 7. I could also say 8 plus 1 is 9. 8 minus 1 is positive 7. But that list never makes me add up to 6. So let me do it one more time just so you see what I'm saying. You don't need to write everything I'm about to write. This is good to write, but you can say, all right, 1 plus 8 is 9. Okay, 9 does not give me that number. 1 minus 8 is negative 7. That doesn't give me that number. I need a 6. 8 minus 1 is positive 7. That doesn't give me the 6 either. So this is not going to be the one we use. So we're not going to use 1 times 8. So let's think 2 times 4. So we could try 2 plus 4, and whoa, there it is right there. 2 plus 4 equals 6. And since everything is positive right here, that's actually a hint that adding is the only possibility anyway. So really, I could have just said 1 plus 8 is 9, and that's a no-go. 2 plus 4 is 6. That matches. So once you figure out what pair of numbers multiplies to be the last number, and in this case adds, but it could also be subtract in other expressions, other factoring questions, what multiplies to be the last number and adds or subtract to be the middle number, then the job is pretty much done. So then you place these two numbers in for m and p. So I plug 2 here and 4 here, but it does not matter which one you put where. So if you said x plus 4 times x plus 2, that answer is just as correct as that one. So there's no reason to worry about the order you put these two numbers in. It's just finding these two numbers that's very important. And the first one is done. Okay, so we're going to do lots of practice here. But what you got to stick in your memory, multiply to be the last number, add or subtract to be the middle number. Multiply to be the last number, add or subtract to be the middle number. So multiply to be 20, factors of 20. So 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5. Okay, now again, these are all positive, so once again, I can just think about adding. 1 plus 20 is 21. Okay, that didn't work. 2 plus 10 is 12. That didn't work, because remember, we're trying to match the 9. Wait, 4 plus 5 is 9. And I know it just happened to be on the first two examples I did. It was the last pair we tried. That one always happened. There'll be times where you find it on the very first try. That just kind of depends on what you list. So you won't have to always try every one. Sometimes you'll find it as soon as you do the first one. But we know 4 times 5 equals 20, and 4 plus 5 equals 9. So we can write x plus 4 and x plus 5. And just like we talked about with grouping, if you want to check your answer, you can. You can do first, outer, inner, last. And if you combine these two like terms, 5 plus 4 is 9, you see that we do get right back to where we started. So that means our answer is correct, x plus 4, x plus 5. So this time we need to do factors of 12. So now what will save you time is if you think about the signs for a little bit. So on the first two examples, everything was positive, so it made sense we were just going to add these numbers together. But here we have a negative number. So remember, we want to multiply to be this number and either add or subtract to be the middle number. So think about this with me. If we multiply two numbers together and they're positive, either they're both positive or they're both negative. Well, if they're both positive, there's no way they can add up to negative 8. There's no way two positive numbers adds up to negative 8. So that must mean, in this scenario, we'll need two negative numbers. So when I list my factors of 12, I'm not going to say 1 and 12. I'm going to say negative 1 and negative 12. Negative 2 and negative 6. Negative 3 and negative 4. So negative 1 plus negative 12 is negative 13. No match. Negative 2 plus negative 6 is negative 8. There we go. There's a match. So you can stop once you find the match. So we see negative 2 times negative 6 does equal positive 12. And negative 2 plus negative 6 equals negative 8, which matches that middle number. So since these are negatives, we'll say x minus 2 and x minus 6. Okay, sometimes they'll give it to you with the terms in a different order. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, but honestly, I think it's easier if you move it back in to be the form we've had all along. Put the variable squared first, the one with just the variable second, like it already is, and then the constant is last. But you got to make sure you keep their signs consistent. This is a plus m squared, so I have a positive m squared. A minus 22, so I keep it minus 22. A positive 21, so I keep it positive 21. And this is the same as last time. it's going to multiply to be a positive number, but add to a negative number. The only way we can multiply two numbers to get a positive and up to get a negative is if they are both negative. So we need factors of 21, and they're both going to be negative. So negative 1, negative 21, negative 3, negative 7. So if I add those two together, I get negative 22, which, hey, there's my match right there. So negative 22 can be achieved by adding negative 1 and negative 21. So we'll do m minus 1, m minus 21. Number 4, x squared plus 2x minus 15. Okay. So this time we need to multiply to be a negative number. So if you multiply two numbers together and they're negative, one has to be positive and one has to be negative. That's the only way you can multiply two numbers and get a negative. And this sign helps you think about which one is going to be positive or negative. Because if when you add the two numbers together, the result is positive, that means the bigger one must be the positive number. So when this is negative and when this is positive, that means you'll have a positive and a negative, and the bigger one will be positive. So for factors of 15, so just think, okay, 1 and 15, but it'll have to be a negative 1 and a positive 15, because that'll multiply to be a negative, but add up to a positive. But that one doesn't match. So let's see. Then there's 3 and 15. 3 would be negative. 5, because the bigger one would be positive. Negative 3 plus 5 is 2. And that matches what we have right there. So this time we'll have 1 minus and 1 plus, because we have 1 negative and 1 positive. Okay, here we're back to what we did in I think 2 and 3. We're multiplying to be a positive, and we're adding or subtracting to a negative. So the only way to multiply to be a positive number is if it's positive, positive, or negative, negative. Since it adds up to a negative, we must need them to both be negative. So for 28, we can do 1 and 28. That adds up to, negative 1 and negative 28 adds up to negative 29. Negative 2 and negative 14 adds up to negative 16. Negative 4 and negative 7 adds up to negative 11. There it is. Negative 11, negative 11. So we will do w minus 4 and w minus 7. And you don't have to write, I want to make sure I make one thing clear. You're not required to show me this work to get the answer correct. If you're able to do some of these in your head, that's fine. And also, even if you do use this little table, you don't have to list every single one. If you want to mentally think through them and see if you can figure out which one is in your head and then just write that one down, that's also okay. I'm just being thorough because there's sometimes it's not going to be easy to figure it out in your head, and so it's easy just to write down all the possibilities and see what works. Okay, here's our third possibility as far as signs. So we have had one before right here where we knew it had to be we're multiplying a positive times a negative, because that's the only way when you multiply you get a negative number. But since when you add them you get a negative number, that means this time the bigger one is the negative number. So we've got to figure out factors of 18. So let's see, the bigger one's negative, so I'd say 1 and negative 18. Adding those together gives me negative 17. 2 and negative 9, add those together and get negative 7. Now there is another possibility, 3 times negative 6, but we've already found the one we need, the negative 7. So a 2 and a negative 9, positive 2, and negative 9 will give us our answer. Okay, 7 and 8 are a little bit different. You see there's variables in every term. Got all these, it was a squared, a to the first, and none. This one, it's one variable squared, then it's two of them, both to the first power, and then one squared. The difference here is very small, and I'll explain it after we figure out what numbers we need to use. So notice, this is a negative, so that means we need to multiply a positive times a negative to make that happen. And since when they're added together, the answer is positive, we know the positive one is the bigger one. So that means -1 and positive 48, which adds up to 47. Okay, no match there. -2 and 24 adds up to 22. No match there. Let's see, -3 and 16, that adds up to 13, and we have our match. So since y is in front, we'll put y in front of both of these. And because -3 and 16 multiply to be -48 and add to 13, we'll still use these numbers. But because this z squared is right here, we need to not just put -3, we need to put -3z. And we put 16 here. We don't just put 16, we put 16z. So it's y minus 3z times y plus 16z. So the only difference when you have that extra variable is that you'll have to put that variable with the numbers you find that multiply to be the last coefficient and add or subtract to the middle one. Okay, last one. So we need multiples of 24. And when we multiply, it's negative. So we'll have one positive and one negative. When we add them, the result is negative. So negative will be the bigger of the two. So I need the big one to be negative, so I do +1, -24. That adds up to -23. Okay, no match there. Okay, I can see the difference can be pretty small between them. So I'm just going to skip ahead and say, okay, 2 and 12 are not close together. 3 and 8 are not close together. But 4 and 6 are. So if I do 4 and -6, 4 plus -6 is -2. We have our match. So I start both with r, because r squared's in front. Then I'll have a +4, but I'll have to stick a t with it so I can get the t in the second term. I'll do the -6, but I'll put a t with it so it has that second term. So we get r plus 4t, r minus 6t. So what, again, you've got to stick in your head is what multiplies to be the last term and adds up to the middle. What multiplies to be the last coefficient and what adds or subtracts to be the middle coefficient.